Over the past several weeks, we've looked at signs your loved one may no longer be safe home alone. No longer safe driving, cooking, bathing, or cleaning. Maybe their friends and neighbors are also worried. But every time you bring it up to your mom, well, it doesn't go so great. Or maybe it does, but she forgets the conversation even happened. I'm your host, Valerie Borgman, and this week we're looking at what you can do when your mom doesn't think she needs help, but you know you need to do something. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Senior Living, a podcast for sons, daughters, grandkids, and spouses who suddenly find themselves tangled in the search for senior living and care. If you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and check out our doable download in today's show notes for a printable summary of the show and a bonus tip from our guest. You're listening to our doable tips, short answers to your questions. Don't see your question listed? Send us a note. Then don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an answer. Hi, and welcome to the show. We've worked with so many families in this exact situation, and we get it. No one wants to think about leaving their home or inviting strangers in to help. I'm sure most of us, when the time comes, are going to feel exactly the same way. I've met very few people who were excited to move. So, this week, we're going to take a look at what one family did to make the very necessary move happen. We're focusing on those with memory loss. And with dementia or Alzheimer's, sometimes the line between safe and not safe can be really hard to see. Sometimes it's an event or a collection of smaller things that tell us something has to change. I'll put a link in show notes to episodes where we talk about some of these signs or events. If you're listening today, chances are you already know something has to happen. But what can you do when your mom or dad doesn't think they need help? Well, the first and maybe most important thing is to not argue. Those with memory loss believe what they believe, even when faced with evidence to the contrary. Arguing will usually lead nowhere. And if it does, and they do agree to whatever your plan for help is, there's a good chance that depending on their stage of memory loss, they won't even remember your conversation or that they agreed to anything. And if you're going through this right now, then you're probably saying, "Yes, Valerie, we know." So let's take a look at what Brian and his family did. They knew their dad's memory loss was progressing. So far, though, nothing major had happened. Their dad had had great neighbors who were looking after him, and Brian was making sure the refrigerator was stocked. Then one day, he got a call from a stranger. His dad was out on one of his walks and got lost. Luckily, a stranger saw he was confused and got his address from his driver's license and took him home. The family was beside themselves. Not only did their dad get lost, but he got into a stranger's car. And who knows what would have happened if that stranger hadn't stopped. The family started taking turns staying with their dad, saying things like they missed him and they just wanted to visit, or their heat went out and so they really needed a place to stay for the night. And in the meantime, they started touring senior living communities. But how in the world were they going to get their dad, who was adamant about staying in his home, to consider a move? And a move to memory care on top of that. Well, they expressed their concerns on the tour, and everyone decided that they would tell their dad a story. Now, some of you right now are saying, there is no way I would lie to my dad. But with memory loss, you sometimes have to communicate with them in a way that would make sense, especially when their safety is the concern. And we call these creative truths. The creative truth that this family came up with was that the city needed their dad to vacate his home while they investigated a water leak. They even came up with an official looking letter that they could present to their dad and say that they got in the mail. If you're thinking, okay, this would never work for my mom or my dad, that's okay. It's all about what you think will work for them. So, what happened next? Well, everyone decided that they would try things out in an assisted living before memory care. This doesn't always work, but if it's early Alzheimer's, there are communities that are set up with both assisted living and memory care so that if something happens, they can quickly make that move over to memory care. So, dad believed the story. And the family decided to take him on the tour. They had already narrowed it down themselves, so they were just bringing him to one tour. And something really unexpected happened. Their dad, as he was comprehending this move and this tour, looking at apartments, he thought that he was actually buying a condo. So everyone, and I mean everyone, went along with that story. The community even brought out paint samples and finishes so that he could pick out the colors and the finishes that he wanted in his condo that he was buying. So the actual move went really smoothly. He moved in thinking that he had bought a condo and everyone was really happy. Except this story doesn't end there. It wasn't too long before their dad started moving his furniture around within his apartment, then taking it apart and leaving those parts outside of his door. And this was heavy furniture, and they knew that he just was no longer safe, even in assisted living. So, we mentioned earlier that there are some communities that have all levels of care. And this was one of those communities. So, they were able to very quickly move him over to their memory care community. But, and maybe you guessed it, they had to come up with another creative truth because he was wondering what the heck was going on. Why couldn't he go back to his apartment? And what was this other place? So there was another story that the family, the staff, everyone got on board with, even the folks over at the memory care community. They all came up with the story. And for weeks and weeks, he kept asking if he could go home. When was he going home? And they just simply kept repeating the story. He didn't remember the previous conversations. And it took a long time, but he did finally stop asking about going back to his apartment and he settled into his new place. If this is your situation, first of all, I am so sorry. This is absolutely one of the toughest things that you can experience. Not only are you losing your loved one to this memory loss, whichever it is, dementia or Alzheimer's, but now you're faced with the guilt of should you move them? Is it time? And then if they are not wanting to move, that just makes your job even harder. The first step is to have a plan in place. Brian's family had a plan. They had already toured communities and they also had that creative truth ready to go. And they made sure that everyone was on the same page. And we talked more about the memory care move, the actual move itself, in a previous episode. And I'll put a link to that in show notes too. One of the things we didn't talk about yet is that if that plan is in home care, know that you're most likely going to have to be there to introduce the caregivers and maybe every time. Most seniors aren't going to open their door to a stranger, and they may not recognize that same caregiver the next day. Now, is it possible to move your mom or dad without these creative truths? Of course it is. And there are just as many stories where the creative truth didn't work and families had to pivot very quickly. Sometimes to the doctor said, or to the assisted living writing a letter saying that mom has to move, or even to the police saying that they're not safe there. Whatever the creative truth or whatever your situation, you know your loved one better than anyone. But hopefully, giving yourself permission to get creative can help make your move a little more doable. Today's episode is brought to you by ClearPath Senior Living Solutions. ClearPath helps families find assisted living, memory care, and other resources. Find our contact information in today's show notes. Check out this episode's doable download in show notes for details, including industry terms and definitions we discussed, as well as a bonus tip from our guest. Have questions or your own tips to share? Leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, make it doable.